Focus, you motherfucker. Come on, there we go. So I went to the research for this one, looking for a dark, disturbing tale, which I mean it is. You read the title of it. Villisca is not something you're going to find in your Pokédex.
Pika, pika.
I was looking into hauntings in the Midwest, and came across this story about a house where a family was murdered, and they still haunt the grounds, and I thought, ooh, cool, spooky stories, I love those. But to be honest, as I researched the actual story of what happened, because I need context like Jason Voorhees needs horny teenagers, the story of the actual murders was too strange not to focus on.
The Midwest Plains holds legends and stories that are rich in American history. From the heritage of the Sioux and the Winnebago to the French colonials, the integration in the westward expansion of the United States through the
Our story takes place in a typical Iowa home with a typical Iowan family whose end was anything but typical and so horrific they may have never left. On the morning of June 12th, 1912, Mary Peckham had stepped out her front door to do Depression-era things, like stare at the sky and yell at the bankers. She'd expected to hear the Moores next door already outside. The family were fine people. The children survived infancy, which was an achievement in that era, more than you might think. And Josiah and Sarah Moore were good and kind, God-fearing people. The yard was empty, though. There was no sign that any of the chores had been done, despite it being well into the morning. Mary, sensing an opportunity to break her routine and possibly have something of note to happen that day, ran over to the Moores' home and started knocking on the door, which fell on silence. The day of June 11th, the day before, hadn't been anything too remarkable in Villisca, a small town in rural Iowa. This was the kind of town that it was notable if a shiny car drove through. So, to say it was unremarkable, it was literally not worth remarking on. Now that word is starting to go weird on me. The Moore family had spent the afternoon and well into the evening at a church event. Being the kind of people they were, they offered lodging to two young girls that happened to be there so they could stay and enjoy the festivities, and not have to worry about a trek home in the dark in rural Iowa. The pastor who had organized the event thanked Josiah and Sarah for their patronage of the church and their assistance with tearing down and setting up the event. Mary Peckham's gut told her to try the door, which was not of the highest manners, but she knew something was wrong. The door was locked and the curtains were drawn. Her concern led her to run home and get the operator to connect her with Josiah's brother, Ross. He got there as quickly as he wanted to and yielded the same results despite pounding on the door and shouting. Using a spare key, he entered the house and found the home eerily still and silent. He called out and there was no response. He walked cautiously through the door and continued calling out for a response. Walking through the parlor and reaching the guest bedroom, he saw the door was not completely latched. He nudged it open and saw the bodies of two young girls with their heads split open. Blood splattered on the floor and walls. He found his brother and Sarah also bludgeoned, and most tragically, their 3 children had also been murdered. Mary had stayed on the porch while Ross went inside, and heard Ross call out in a controlled panic to call the sheriff. When the police searched, they found the whole family. The 2 girls that Ross had found were identified as house guests invited to stay from the children's event the day before. Who would have killed an entire family and their house guests? For what reason? Was it greed? Sexual depravity? A passion to redecorate every room with a murder motif? The police began scouring for clues and identifying suspects. They rounded up a hobo who slept with an axe, a perverted reverend, a state senator, a relative, a serial killer, and of course, to round out any lineup in 1912, a man named Blackie, who was white. Andrew Sawyer was a transient who happened to be in the area. He was a man who slept with his axe and slept fully dressed and packed as if he were ready to run at any moment. Frank F. Jones owned the John Deere dealership and goods store in Villisca. He was a respected businessman who was elected to the Iowa State Senate, promising to build walls and keep out all the illegal Indians. He also had a habit of accusing his business rivals, like Josiah Moore, of having an affair with his daughter-in-law. William Blackie Mansfield was a suspect in a series of murders in Colorado that were similar enough to the Moores murders that the Burns Detective Agency sent a representative to Villisca from Colorado just to participate in the investigations. Henry Lee Moore was a serial killer in Iowa and was sentenced for murder of his wife and mother a few months after the Moore's murder. His weapon of choice? An axe! Okay, I gotta ask, was there anyone in this fucking town that wasn't an axe murderer? The investigators had leads. They had opportunity established, but they still didn't have a motive. After interviewing the murder hobo, Andrew Sawyer, several times, despite him sleeping with an axe and showing a distinct interest in the murders, he was ruled out. Henry Lee Moore was ruled out on account of him having just killed his wife and mother, and he was likely all tuckered out from those killings to, do another entire family. It was speculated that Blackie Mansfield had been hired by Frank F. Jones, the state senator, to kill Josiah Moore and his family because Josiah had left the employment of Frank Jones and started his own competing business that was taking away a sliver of profit from Mr. Jones.
Mr. Blackie, I presume you've dealt with that troublesome upstart Josiah as we have discussed.
Yeah, I'd say that, yep.
Yes. Well, as unpleasant as it may be, Josiah can always start over in Missouri or Ohio. You did offer him a fair price for a store, I assume?
Nah, he didn't really want to, so I bludgeoned him with an axe.
Oh, what?
You know, the lumberjack tool thing.
I said to buy him out and scare him.
Oh, he's good and scared. I mean, I bludgeoned him. I bludgeoned him, his wife, his kids, and a couple house guests they had.
Oh my god.
And I mean, if that doesn't get the message across.
Oh god, I will be...
Yeah, I mean, their heads were split wide open. Oh, wait, I've committed a murder, huh? Oh boy. I've really got myself into a pickle here. Josiah may have banged the senator's daughter-in-law, but it's unconfirmed. Oh, and Josiah's brother-in-law also had a habit of threatening to kill Josiah on several occasions, well documented in the community. Salt of the earth folks there in Iowa. Nothing that can't be solved with an axe murder. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself right now, what about the Reverend? I'm getting to the Reverend, okay? Just calm. The good Reverend George Kelly was a traveling English reverend who had suffered a mental breakdown, was accused of leering and peeping, and had a habit of asking women to pose nude for him. So of course it only made sense for the church to offer the role of a Sunday school teacher. He was known throughout the town as being somewhat loose in the gray matter, but overall he was okay. The good Reverend had been the one to set up the Children's Day event, the event that the Moore's family was at. Being piously lecherous and generally a gospel-preaching pervert, he showed an unusual interest in the murders of the family. Like, kind of obsessively unusual. To the point that the investigation and all the investigators started looking at him a little closer, and his whereabouts. When they finally brought him in for an interview to question him, he openly confessed to killing the entire family with an axe. However, they dismissed his confession because he got a number of the details wrong. Also, it could be because he was a mad, barmy, brain-sick cuckoo. Eventually, they did try him, though. The first case ended in a hung jury. The second case ended in an acquittal. And this isn't related to the murders, but it's just a fun little garnish on Reverend Kelly's story. 2 years after he was arrested for the Moore's murder investigation, he was arrested again for sending lewd correspondence and photographs to a woman whose address he got in a newspaper advert. Depression-era dick pics and butthole shots by the Reverend George. So, who was responsible? Was it the murder hobo in the parlor with the axe? The state senator in the parlor with the axe? The serial killer in the parlor with the axe? Okay, it's gonna be with the axe, okay? It's gonna be with the axe. And it's going to be in the parlor. Okay, we know that. Well, according to the Iowa investigation, in the time since, the house where the Moores were brutally murdered has been maintained to be haunted, and in recent years has been opened as a tourist attraction, drawing thousands of ghost seekers from across the country. So if you're ever in sunny Villisca, Iowa, you're probably going to get murdered with an axe. If you don't, you can go see the house though, and maybe get some Casey's. You gotta pick it up though. For some reason they don't deliver out of that store. They don't even have a damn Five Guys. So let me know your thoughts and comments in the, down in this general region. If you liked the video, please remember to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Don't get murdered with an axe. And until next time, bye.